Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Hernan Diaz's novel Trust. This is going to be a full spoiler review, so if you do not want to be spoiled of this book, if you haven't gotten a chance to read it, please read it and come back unless you don't mind the spoils, and if that is the case, please stick around. I'll be going over the author's background, going into a rundown of what the book is about, talking about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Hernan Diaz is originally from Argentina. He's been writing professionally. I know his first novel was published in about 2017 to glowing reviews. It has a lot of acclaim with that. This is the first thing I've read, and this actually did win the Pulitzer Prize last year. It's also won the Kirkus Book Review, and so has been very lauded on many end-of-year lists. He, I believe, also teaches at a couple colleges in the U.S., but he is starting to make a name for himself for sure after this book winning the Pulitzer. This is a book of metafiction. Again, if you don't want to be spoiled, I'm going to be going into full spoilers after this point. So 3, 2, 1. This is considered a book of metafiction, and the book itself is broken into 4 different sections. The first section is a novel within the novel that portrays the meeting of a New York financier and his future wife, their relationship together after they are married, and the financier is able to short the stock market, making a huge amount of money, even more money, even a larger fortune than they had before. And then his wife essentially has a terminal illness where I don't think it's ever really stated in the book, but it's something akin to schizophrenia or some kind of borderline personality disorder, some kind of mind-body disease where she also has eczema and has all kinds of different health problems, and then she dies at the end of the novel. In the second section of the book, we see the autobiography of a man named Andrew Bevel, who is the real version of the fictionalized character that we saw in the first chapter, and we learn from him in his autobiography his view of the world and his basically a brief rundown of how he sees his life. In the third section, we follow the writer of the autobiography, essentially the ghostwriter of the autobiography, a woman named Ida, who has been hired by Andrew Bevel to write this autobiography in order to counteract what he sees as smears that were originated in the novel that we read in the first section of the book, the novel within the novel called Bonds. He's hired this woman to essentially write the autobiography after the death of his wife to kind of clean up the idea of misconceptions that people may have after reading the fictionalized version of his life. And then in the final section, we read a diary of Mildred Bevel, who is Andrew Bevel's wife, and we get kind of her version of the story. So I will say, I think after the first section, which to me was a little slow, the book does pick up and is very much a page turner. I was able to read about 90% of this in 2 days, which is a lot faster than what I usually read. I thought the book was well written. I thought there was, I think he does an okay job of sentence to sentence being pretty strong. I wasn't confused in parts. So I thought Hernan Diaz, I think, is sentence to sentence, is a pretty good writer. I think that where I thought the novel was going is kind of a mediation on truth and what truth is, which I thought at times could have been pretty interesting. If there are things that I would ding it on, so I guess I'll pause here and just say, I think the book is fine in terms of the quality of the book, in terms of the quality of the writing. I could see why people would really be drawn to this novel. My issue with the novel, and I understand completely why it won a Pulitzer. I think it kind of won more on the politics of it, to be honest with you, than the actual quality of the novel. I don't think it's saying anything particularly groundbreaking or different or new, and I don't think it's doing it in any ways that are groundbreaking, different, or new. And while I thought the writing was just fine, it was fine. It wasn't extraordinary. There's some lines here and there that I thought were very poetic and very well written, but they're so few and far between, and most of the book is very meat and potatoes. This is the story, and I didn't really find myself connecting with any of the characters. I didn't really like any of the characters. I think that's maybe part of the point. The book is almost entirely set in the 1930s. We learn a fictionalized version of Andrew Bevel's upbringing, and we learn his version of the upbringing. There's not really much difference. So he's just kind of a person who inherited a bunch of money and was able to turn that small fortune into a larger fortune. And I guess this is when you get into deeper spoilers. Is basically able to, his wife is able to assist him with the her crazy mathematical formula that apparently she's the only person in the world who has access to this and is able to make them a lot of money, which she then funnels into the arts. And so what I originally thought was going to be kind of a mediation on truth is really ultimately the theme of the book is really how all men, because it is all men in this book, will flat out give you their political opinions in five minutes or less, don't care anything about gaining political power, and really, to a man in this book, have absolutely no qualms or issues about abusing, abasing, debasing women. And it's just like every character in this book. And you're like, I know Margaret Atwood has written on similar themes, and I know that there are authors who do write on this. It just, to me, was like way over the top. And oftentimes there are men, especially male authors, who get accused of not being able to write female authors. Male authors who oftentimes are accused of not being able to write female characters and extending them empathy and understanding and the experiences that they go through as women. And it was almost like Hernan Diaz did that with every man in this book. And so it was just like every man in this book was paper thin, had no other motivations than what I spoke about before, seemed to have no qualms whatsoever with expecting women to wait on them hand and foot. And so really thematically, I bounced off this book really hard. And what I thought was going to be, like I said, a mediation on truth and what it means to be, how far someone's autobiography is from their real life, which, has been tried and done before, but I thought that's where it was going. And it ultimately is about how terrible men are to women. And you may really, there may be something that speaks to you as a person. It wasn't really something that spoke to me in my lived experience as a person, so I didn't really enjoy the novel. And the novel isn't like super difficult to read, and it's not really super deep. And all the characters, I was surprised of how thin and unlikable all the characters were. And I guess maybe that's the point, but it seemed to be that the 4 or 5 male characters are all terrible people, and the 2 or 3 female characters are all, superstar unicorns who are just downtrodden by all these men in their life. And I wish that he had at least had the bravery, if that's what you're going to write about, okay. But at least have the bravery of putting it in the current day so we can say, okay, are you saying that all men do this, or all billionaires get their money because there's a secret woman behind the scenes handling their business for them? At least put that in the current day so we can actually have that discussion. Because by putting in the 1920s where like romantic relationships and romantic love was not something that people married for as much as they do today, that was very much, not... I'm not saying that no one married romantically for love, because they did, but it was much more commonplace for people of different families to marry for money, kind of similar to a European aristocracy than it is kind of common in today's world. And so I just felt like the book was pseudo-brave and didn't really say anything of substance, and I don't think... I'll be interested to read the reviews of why people seem to like this book so much. For me, and having read it, again, I don't want to slag the writing, because I think the writing itself is fine. There's some nice passages, but there was nothing extraordinary to me about this book other than if you really agree with the politics and you feel like it's this hidden history of women being treated poorly. Like I said, Margaret Atwood and others have written on it. I was expecting it to be something akin to The Devil House by John Darnielle, which I've reviewed before. I'll leave that link below. I was expecting to be more of something like that as I was reading. And it is a page turner. I'll give him credit for that. I don't think he's able to write effectively in different voices, because for him to be super effective, he would have to write in 4 different voices. The last chapter is somewhat distinct in the writing style, but the other 3 very much sound like they could be written by the same person. And so even something like City on Fire, which I think does a good job of delineating between different writing styles, I don't even think he was on that level here. So I'd be curious as to see why people resonated with this book as much as they seem to be. I just didn't think it was particularly deep. I didn't think it really had anything interesting to say other than that. And if that's something that a message you really gravitate toward due to your lived experience, I totally understand that. It just, for me, it didn't really click. So yeah, and I don't think anything as far as it's not really an experimental novel. It just is kind of broken down in these 4 viewpoints. And again, I felt that the characters verged on stereotypes, especially the male characters. And to me, it was borderline misandrist. It's just as far as you're telling me all these characters, like every single one, every single male character feels the same way. And so I was irked by that, and I think that maybe knocked out some of the enjoyment. I think that there's a secondary theme as far as, the myth of the self-made man, but that's certainly in the novel, and that's certainly there, but it's overwhelmed by the primary theme about just men treating women as, necessary step stools to get to wherever they want. And so again, that may resonate with you if that's something you've experienced. I totally get it. It's not something I've experienced or seen really, and so it didn't really click with me. So that is Trust by Hernan Diaz. I thought the writing overall was fine, but I think that the lack of depth of the characters and just really the plot itself is not particularly super interesting. So having to read, essentially the same plot, 2 or 3 times, I think also hurt the novel. Because the plot itself was nothing really to write home about. And because you're not talking about real people, you're just like, if you have to read the same story 3 times and the story's not interesting, that interesting to begin with, So, Trust by Hernan Diaz. Next time I'm going to be reading a biography of Thomas Jefferson, The American Sphinx. So, if you have read Trust by Hernan Diaz, and there were things that you really enjoyed about it, please let me know below. And again, maybe I'm going in with some preconceptions because I saw that it did win the Pulitzer, and so I'm sure that that's part of my reticence to like it. And again, I thought that the writing was fine. I didn't think it blew me out of the water. I thought it moved pretty quickly, the pacing. But overall, I'm a little surprised on quality level of why this book won a Pulitzer. I understand from a political level why, but if I'm missing something, please let me know. And until next time, I'll have the link below. Who I would recommend this to, if you are someone who likes, again, I wouldn't call this an experimental novel. If you like kind of finance and you like the world of tycoons and how people make their money and all that stuff, but if you've made it this far into the video, you've probably read the book already. If you haven't read it and it sounds interesting, I would probably say if you like something like Devil House, where part of what you're talking about is, how truth and how stories are made and who controls the truth and how that happens, then you may enjoy this to some degree. Again, I didn't hate it other than I felt I've said what I've said about it. Yeah. So until next time, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you have read it, please let me know if there are things that I was missing about it or things that you in particular liked about the book. I just felt like it was, even the theme itself, I felt was very sloppily done, and I think it was not very nuanced. And I think like the writers who I've read similar things about, like Margaret Atwood, like I've said, I think there was a bit more nuance and style to it, and I seem to gravitate more towards that. I just thought the book was kind of big and stupid. Trust, Hernan Diaz. Until next time, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, bye.